Welcome to our annual meeting per se. It's actually our annual video. This is year 2 or 3 on this.
It's got to be 3.
I don't know. 2 or 3. It doesn't matter.
She's
you don't
saying
really
3,
care.
so.
We are just going to give you a quick rehash of 2020, a year we all want to kind of forget, but that we also saw God's incredible faithfulness, and also talk to you guys about what we're going to be doing, Lord willing, throughout year 2021. So with that, we'll just start with our outline. We have nothing exciting. We're kind of winging it a little bit. We have a basic outline, right? So who knows
Just
what
a
kind
few
of
points.
hilarity or folly we will fall into. But Ethiopia, that was maybe our first major thing as a church. We took off in early March.
The week it all hit.
Yeah, literally, we're being told the world is going to come to an end.
And we're boarding a plane.
And we're heading to Africa. Yeah. Some people were actually saying, I hope you can come back. And we're like, we do too.
We'll see.
But
I packed extra clothes that trip.
Did you pack extra?
I thought I may be there a month or 2.
I figured Africa, you can get laundry done real cheap. So I felt that was pretty good. And we were staying at a nice hotel, Africa style, so it was good. But we did go to Africa, and we continued our work there, teaching the pastors. Unfortunately, it was a new cohort of pastors, and
was it?
It was.
That was the first one.
It was the first one.
We normally do 3 modules
per
year.
And so I have a bad feeling we're going to have to restart the whole thing once we hopefully can get back there. But during that time, we were watching the whole COVID thing unfold, hearing from our family, wondering if we were going to make it back okay. And back then, we didn't have to put masks on or anything like that, and we made it back.
Well, I remember, though, we were teaching that week, and Wednesday hit. And then them in Ethiopia started getting pretty nervous about the virus and everything. And they started shutting down, remember?
Yep.
And then we got notification from the U.S., if you're abroad, get home now. But if you don't leave now, don't be surprised if we don't let you in.
Yeah.
So we worked hard at trying to get an early flight. They wanted to charge us some exorbitant fee. So we waited one more day.
We were just like, we're gonna try to do it. That's right. We had to actually end the thing early because everyone wanted to go back to their villages and just kind of retreat. It was fun watching that kind of African idea of, they gave us that fluid to wipe on our hands, and someday if you ever have a chance, go to Africa and you'll understand why we chuckle at times. But we did it. We came off the plane, we came back here, and we came back to a church that was not what we left. We left with a normal church, normal service. Everything was fine. We come back and movie theater was shut down.
Movie theater was shut down. This was shut down. And the nice thing is that we had a 150-hour plane flight. So it gave us plenty of time to begin to think through how are we going to deal with this unprecedented chaos. So we did like many, and we thought to do the live stream. And we started building walls and
you and Mark put together that great little wall, and we were completely guessing. We didn't know what to do. Yeah. God was very kind. Lena and Mark worked real hard to help us out with that. And so we put together our virtual church, which we never liked, never agreed with, but it was what it was. And
we taught through Philippians on Sundays.
Yep.
And then a psalm on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we rotated each week. It was fun.
And it was actually well received by the people. I think during that time, people were scared. I mean, at that point, nobody really knew what to expect. And it bothered us, but I mean, we were trying to just be wise because again, when you don't know, let's err on the side of caution. But after that, we finally opened up with our campus, and so we made that decision that look, we're going to begin to gather now at our church, but your campus was still shut down completely, right? Yeah,
because we were at the mercy of the movie theater. So even though Milwaukee began to open up a little bit, the businesses were still not, I mean, they had to figure out a bunch of legal stuff as to what to do. And so it wasn't until end of August that we finally got back in there.
It was that long?
That long.
Wow.
So they were meeting basically in their homes as community groups and just streaming the service. So they didn't experience the full body again until about August.
No, I just remember how frustrating that was. So we actually even changed how we did Sundays. So we put up on the stage our table and our podcast mics, and we just continued that more panel-like give and take between us. And part of that was just, again, a sense of unity, trying to show that we were going to not pretend like we were fine, too bad for Milwaukee. We wanted to have them understand that as long as they can't gather to worship, we're not going to pretend like everything's fine down here and, too bad, so sad, that kind of a thing.
Yep.
So, and that worked.
It worked.
We started to see people coming in from other churches who were looking to just gather, and the people started taking masks off. And just what was very interesting was the desire to gather.
Yeah.
It was actually very heartwarming for me, just as a pastor, to see that the people understood they need one another, that this virtual church is not good for the soul.
They want to sing.
Pardon?
They want to sing.
Yeah, they want to sing.
Take the Lord's Supper.
They want to talk. Yeah, just taking the Lord's Supper, the whole thing. And that was a burden for me, just the fact that Milwaukee, they were doing it on a very small scale within the homes, but not that complete gathering. So we did that. And then in the midst of all of that, riots. Yeah, we had the police shooting.
Well, the first thing hit was in May
Floyd.
with the George Floyd stuff in
That's right.
Minneapolis. And then that resulted in a riot. Well, it wasn't a riot. It was protesting here
Black
at
Lives
that time.
Matter protest.
But that launched the whole issue then of social justice, critical race theory, intersectionality within the church, that, we were staying silent on that stuff for quite a while, but realized now we have to speak. We have to. And so that began a whole bunch of conversation and thinking and reading and podcasts. And so what we did up here is you remember we did that first
we did
address.
that with the police riots and civil
thinking through what is biblical justice. How do you relate to government? And
that was interesting to me because, again, we started getting people from other churches coming. They wanted to hear. They wanted a biblical perspective. We lost some people as well over that because there were very strong thoughts on both sides. And what we were just simply trying to do is say, look, the Bible does speak to.
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing we're not known for, it's not taking a position.
No.
So.
And we would argue, and we've said so on our podcast, that this whole social justice BLM mess, it really is a dividing point within the church. Was it you? I used the 894 imagery.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, when you're heading up into Milwaukee, there's 2 lanes then that you get on the 894. And for a while there, you're just running parallel with the other 2 lanes. But there comes a critical point where if you're on those 2 lanes, you're heading a different direction, and all of a sudden, rapidly, the directions change. And I think that's really what's going on here. Is for a while there, it was really neat to talk about we believe in justice. We believe in Black Lives Matter. Well, nobody disagrees with that. I've never met somebody who, I'm sure they exist, but says, well, no, a black life doesn't matter. The question was, what was the agenda behind that? And where are you planting your flag? And what does it look like to have a gospel witness in the community? And, the guys walking around with their protests, love thy neighbor, and that this somehow meant violating the law and involving yourself in the protests and stuff. I personally just believe that has created a situation where churches, including us, are heading in very clear directions.
Yeah.
And it will be very difficult for there to be a cooperation.
Yeah, and I think you would agree with this, that a sad part in all of this is the amount of people coming, to your campus, but also to ours, who are heartbroken because they essentially have lost their church.
Yeah.
And I feel for them because they're incredibly loyal, which I love, and they want their church. but it's completely changed to where they almost don't recognize it anymore. And so they're really wrestling through these issues.
Yeah.
And so I think we've been helpful in some
I
ways
hope
in
we
helping
have.
them to think through that, but it's crazy.
Well,
And many churches, I mean, we know plenty that have already split over the issue.
yeah. And then when Jacob Blake was shot, that hit close to home because we could have easily had one of our police officers involved in that. And the riots erupted, and we watched our city burn.
Yep.
And that just forced the issue all the more. And it was very interesting how so many people, when it was George Floyd and it was up in Minneapolis, you know, they're pontificating, that's the word I'll use, about the virtues of social justice and the need for racial reconciliation and all this. It was really outside of a sound biblical foundation. But now when they're watching their own city burn, they weren't still pontificating, but they also weren't reversing themselves. They just remained silent. And I think, again, it created a situation where people were looking for a clear voice. What does the scripture say? How do we deal with this? And they weren't getting it. Mm-hmm. And so we began to see an influx again of people. Right. And then the challenge of how do we shepherd them? You know, how do you shepherd a flock that's not even able to gather? And how do I shepherd a flock that is really made up of multiple flocks? Yeah, so you have all these people coming from different places, and they're all looking to worship, and they want to sing and fellowship, but they're not used to missio. They're not used to what we do and how we do it, and so it was it still is quite a challenge. I mean, almost every week, I know for us, almost every week we have somebody new show up, and it's almost the same story every time. They're just tired of what they're watching with their church and discouraged, and they heard through the grapevine that you guys just worship. So that's encouraging. Yeah. But it came with some unexpected blessings. What were they?
Well, for us, I mean, there was a lot of disruption, obviously.
Yeah, that would be the word.
For quite a few months. But, you know, as we mentioned, they met I mean, there's new people at the church now who weren't here just a few months ago who had to experience this in Milwaukee. But they met in those home churches, and they sang, they took the Lord's Supper, they fellowshiped, they heard the Word of God taught. But in all of that, they really began to have an opportunity to function truly missionally in a weird, strange, different way. And so because they were meeting in the homes, they were actually able to invite people to that. And there's some have come to Christ as a result of this effort, which is just, that alone is worthy of much thanksgiving, but it's also just strange and crazy. But they came, and I asked them, I said, so is it weird meeting in a person's home? I mean, you've never really been to church, and they're like, actually, if I had to go to a church building, I don't think I would have gone. But the fact that I was in the home of someone I knew, it made it very easy for us. And they came, and we were teaching through hermeneutics at the time. And I'm like, so you're unbelievers, you have very little knowledge of scripture, and they come in to hermeneutics, where we're talking about continuity and discontinuity and strange things like that. And they're like, that did it for us. I mean, that it totally opened our eyes to understand how I was never taught. I've been to churches before, but I've never understood how a pastor arrives at the conclusion of the meaning of a text. And when you were teaching that, it opened my eyes to everything. And in that process,
which is interesting, because on the pushback, you had others people who had been Christians for a long time, just thinking this is a waste of time. Why are we teaching on this?
Yeah. Heard it before.
Yeah, or this is so dry. And yet here's a non-Christian who is like, thank you. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And so it was a lot of, it was fun to watch. It was exciting. In all that whole process, there was a lot of people poking around. They had found us via online, because Mark and Lena, they did a phenomenal job, and our online presence was pretty good. And so those videos of us teaching on Sundays were being shared. People in Milwaukee were finding them. And so we're getting random emails of, hey, when you guys open up, we're going to be there. I'd love to just meet you beforehand. And so I'm getting meals with people who have apparently been watching us for 2 months, and I don't know your name. And that's just interesting, but neat. And now they're part of our church. And, so a lot of that kind of thing happened. And so it was very encouraging. We came out of COVID with no building in the first place. We're meeting in a movie theater, but we came out of COVID having grown by like 30%.
That was what I thought was fascinating, is that in the midst of this, most churches are shrinking, and God was kind to us. Because, I mean, I felt bad for all the churches that had planted throughout the United States. What a difficult time
to try to plant in COVID.
Yeah. And especially with the mindset that so many, I don't want to sound critical or mean-spirited here, but there's just different philosophies on how you're going to plant, and there's a big emphasis on more of an attractional, event-oriented idea that we're going to get all kinds of things. We're going to have food and get people there, and they couldn't do it. And so all of a sudden their whole methodology changed. Ours didn't. I mean, the vehicle was different. We had to use video, but it was the same thing. Like I said, we're going to talk on hermeneutics. We're going to work our way through a psalm. We're going to deal with this or that. But it was just teaching, biblical teaching, and people were hearing it. And it struck a chord. I like one of the unexpected blessings for me is it did force people, I think, who were very comfortable in their church, but were not being challenged in their church in any way. They weren't really growing. They were just content. It forced them to have to begin to think and look, if that makes sense. All of a sudden they're just realizing I've got to open my eyes and cast a bigger vision out there of what's out there. And again, we've had people show up here and they're here for one Sunday, and it's like, yeah, you're not coming back. But we've had so many others who they just start coming and they're settling in, and we've just watched them slowly become connected. They start to realize that they're being challenged. They're developing real relationships. They're being provoked to think about their walk in Christ. And again, all of that was because they were thrust into a situation they didn't ask for, but that was their situation.
Another unexpected blessing, and again, all the disruption sort of forced this, but we were trying to get back in the theater, and we were being played with a little bit, not on purpose, but just the nature of legal stuff and what was going on. We were told about 3 or 4 different dates that we could get back in there, and it was very frustrating.
That's the word we're using?
That's the word I'm going to go
Okay.
with. We'll keep it clean. And so that got me thinking, we need a place to meet that is ours, where we're not dependent on somebody or something. On top of that, with the direction of the culture and the politics and some of the other things that are going on, we definitely need our own location where we can do what we're going to do and not have to abide by whatever unjust mandate has come down.
That and lawyers, right? You're at the mercy of the lawyers for the movie theater. And they're always looking at mitigating the risk.
Yeah. So I started looking at numbers, and I realized our church has been very generous. And I realized we could pull off, I mean, it's not gonna be anything crazy, but we could pull off purchasing potentially our own property, and then realizing that a mortgage costs barely anything more than we're paying for rent.
Right.
So one church building popped up, and it's just down the street from our theater that we're at now, 5 minutes. And that's pretty incredible to think about. 6 minutes. Well, if you're hitting the red lights, yeah. So we went for it, and we raised.
Well, they wanted essentially 700,000, which we weren't going to pay.
No.
We went at 5.
No, I came back at 450.
Oh, that's right. You really lowballed them.
Well, who's going to buy a church in COVID?
Yeah.
So this is my.
And they were a dead church.
Yes. There were 15 members left.
15 to 20.
Yeah.
And I think average age was 70.
Yeah. So we met at about 550, and we, in order to do that for a down payment on a commercial loan, you have to put down 20%.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to raise $110,000. Well, we raised that in no time flat.
I think a month.
Yeah.
Kenosha
helped,
noted,
yeah.
well, we gave 50 of it, but that's still 70,000 for a small church.
Yeah.
And
Milwaukee raised 80.
It was just crazy what we were able to see come in.
Yeah.
God was exceedingly kind there.
Yeah.
And you guys had your first Sunday, formal Sunday.
Just had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a wonderful time. And I think everyone was very encouraged. I mean, for all that 2020 has been, I don't know anyone at our church who can't be encouraged right now, because I mean, God is blessing us. We're growing. We have a building. There's a lot of good things in the barrel right now, and so it's, again, for all it's been, it's just been a blessing in the midst of the chaos.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, I feel like you guys have now a place where you can kind of plant yourself. You can develop that identity. I think the neighborhood will be blessed by your presence there. They're seeing life in a place that's been basically vacant. It's a place you can go somewhere with.
Well, we're not sojourners anymore. Doesn't feel like. I mean, anyone who's there, I think, understands that we're just a church. I mean, we're not this, church plant that's, being held together by bubblegum and shoestrings anymore. We're legit. And
yeah, but 3 years into a plant too. That's also an incredible blessing. A lot of people just don't understand that church plants just don't, in 3 years, go from being planted to they actually have an actual piece of property, and they're stable. You guys are now starting to see about 100 people there on a Sunday?
Yeah, well, if everyone's here, we're over 100.
With new people coming in all the time, and each one of those people, they are inviting other people. You have some people who are incredibly evangelistic. You were saying that you have one small group that.
Yeah, they're maxed out.
And
they've not been a small group that long. And I mean, I would say since
that's great.
They were formed out of the necessity of the house church thing. And so starting in May is when they had formed, and now they're bursting at the seams, and they've multiplied.
But it's by inviting people.
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
So along with that, you've seen people come to Christ.
We had 6 baptisms in Milwaukee and 6 new members.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good.
Well, and remember that we're supposed to be doing these celebration services, and we come back for Easter and
nothing.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. And then when we went for when was the next one?
September.
Oh, and then Christmas. I'm like, but we've done 2. I'm in February now. I've already lost. Yeah, so we had our September one. We did it here at our campus. That was crazy. And then we did it again here because the businesses still are not allowing large gatherings up in the Racine area. So in all of that, in spite of all of that, and not being able to gather, and people were coming to Christ, people were being baptized, people were coming in and saying, we want to be part of this church, and that's encouraging.
Yeah.
At the same time, while you're doing all of that, we're in the process of upgrading our room downstairs, which is, we call it now the Send Room, where hopefully eventually we'll be training people to become planters. That's the whole goal of it. But we also completely remodeled the sanctuary. And that was actually a blessing too, that it was a bigger project than...
How long did it take?
Forever, it seemed. I don't know.
Was it longer
a couple
than
of months?
Couple
2 or 3 months, yeah. And we had hoped it would be just a couple of weeks, but like all things, when you're dealing with a church and an older church, you start tearing into stuff. It takes time. But because we weren't meeting at that point, it was okay. We were able to let them do the work. They did a great job. And I think it was neat because our very first Sunday back, the church had been completely remodeled. It's the first time that most people saw the new room. So we had new chairs, carpet, the room was enlarged, everything was different. So I think it also helped them come to realize that there was something new. and it was very encouraging for them. So we were thankful for that. At the same time, we also saw 3 baptisms, and we saw 6 new members ourselves, and so we're still having that. Those are not the numbers we'd like to see, but we don't have real control over that. What we're trying to do is say, not how do we increase all of that as much as how are we faithful to be doing what we need to do? How do we sow? And that God will cause the growth as he sees fit. But Kenosha has undergone a lot of changes as a result. We've had an incredible growth of people coming in who are new to the church. And we're having people who do not know Christ coming to the church. And we're seeing people sharing Christ with them. And we have a lot of anticipation to see, much like what you've seen, that as they're hearing, that faith will come, and that they will be able to be brought in, not just as members, but baptized as new professing Christians. That's very good.
Yeah.
But back to the celebration service. Again, we canceled Easter because nobody was allowed to do anything. Then we hosted it, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the bouncy house.
Is that what it says here?
Yeah, the bouncy house from hell.
Oh, that was an intentional word there.
Yeah. I mean, that was my idea. I thought, hey, we're going to do this. Why don't we try a bouncy house? I don't know. How much do they cost? And Judy looked into it. It was cheap. I'm like, what can go wrong? Apparently, 4,000 children were crammed into something that was made for like 30. And so immediately the ladies of the church set rules. And all of a sudden you had to line up, and they only allowed a certain number in at a time.
Got to police it.
Yeah, they said that some of the small children were just crushed against the webbing, and I was like, oh. But it worked. We fed everybody. Everyone sat around, talked, had a great time. Nobody complained about the bouncy house. I think we had only one minor injury, and it worked out so much so that we had the Christmas celebration. Esme kind of planned that one, and we had an ethnic celebration. And something that came from that was I had no idea how ethnically diverse our church is. We had quite a few different ethnicities represented. They all brought different foods. I thought, here's right now the cool thing is now we have to be a multicultural, multi-ethnic church. That's what you have to do. If you're going to really model the gospel in the church, that's what you have to become. But they're trying to do it through a program. We're not trying anything. We're just bringing the gospel to people, and guess what happens?
Yep.
But that was a great celebration too. Again, even though it was in the middle of winter, somehow they stuck a bouncy house into the gymnasium, and everyone had a blast. I couldn't stay. It was too loud for me. I stayed for as long as my ears could handle. But
there were a lot of people there.
Yeah, and I was thankful for it. But we also have another thing that really started with you, and that's the school. You were just thinking about that, and you ran into Nick.
Well, yeah, I mean, this goes back a few years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, I had just been doing my own. I had just discovered this thing called classical education, and I'm like, what's that? And I mean, it shows my ignorance. And as I just kept reading and doing research on it, it was very intriguing to me. And so we started talking about it. I mean, you probably had known about it, but so I thought it's something I would like to maybe consider with my family, and just taking a look at where the things are culturally, and all the politics and stuff. We're like, what, this might be a strategic, helpful tool for the church. And so we started. There was a groundswell of people interested in classical education at the time.
Well, having all of the garbage unfolding with the riots and the social justice and everything else, I mean, in no pun intended, the mask came off on public education and showing how bankrupt the whole system is. And I think a lot of people started saying there's got to be something better.
Well, and that really is what pushed it, because it went from, hey, this would be a neat option, to this is like almost a necessity. And so about a little over a year ago, I got a random email from some guy named Nick, and he had found us via online. He's from the Milwaukee area, and he was just interested in finding a good church for his family. He's going to Southern Seminary right now for Christian education. And so he wanted to just get a meal. So we got a meal with him. And in the course of just finding out who he is and what he does, I learned he's an assistant headmaster for a classical Christian school. And I'm like, interesting. And so we just began a conversation. And so over this past summer, he was up here a couple times. We had the opportunity to meet with him, explain to us a little bit of his vision, tell him, what our interests are and our vision for what we'd like to do. And they paired up quite well. And so in all of that, it's, if you've been around our church any length of time, you know what we're trying to do. But it's looking pretty good. There's a board now formed.
Yeah, it's really come together nicely. We were able to meet with them, give them a formal offer. Salary-wise, we were able to find the money in the budget to cover all of that. He accepted. So he'll be coming up, Lord willing, in May. He'll be finished with school, and he'll be able to come up and move his family and start formally full-time and get this moving. But in the process, we were able to come up with a name, the Imago Dei Classical School at Missio Dei Fellowship. So,
that's what you named it?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
That was his idea, I believe, and I like it. It's the image of God at the mission of God. I thought that works, and so he came up with a crest. It involves honeybees. I still don't completely understand the honeybees, but there's a whole imagery within the crest. He's got a griffin because he likes griffins, and who doesn't like a griffin? But so we came up with a domain name. We're going to start developing a website. But the more important thing is that we were able to see people who were well qualified to serve on the board be willing to serve. And so we have an excellent board. It's small. Each one of them brings something to the board, like Evelyn is the lawyer. Dave Fantle is just the brilliant tactician that he is. John Randall is the elder kind of functioning there. We have Jonathan Remmers, who is the fundraiser guy. Taylor, he's the president of the board. He's just running with the whole thing. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, and that's just showing how bad of a person I am. But we've met, and we're already off and running with it. Now we're looking at hiring the teachers. We have curriculum set. So Lord willing, come the fall, we'll actually start our very first series of classes. And we're starting small. We're starting most likely with kindergarten to third. We might have enough for fourth grade. We don't know. We're trying to be flexible, but we're trying to start with what we can do well. We're limiting it to members only right now because we want to establish the culture. We don't want to be market driven. We don't want to be, how do we grow this and get everybody in there? We want it to be something that it's being motivated by certain convictions. And so we want those established. And then in the next year after this, we'll begin to look outward, and people who wish to partake of it, they can. But they're coming into an established culture rather than some guy who's already doing classical education coming in, then speaking loudly about how, well, I think it should be done this way, and maybe forcing himself or this idea on that we don't want. So we're excited. It also fits well with the missional image of that we're trying to raise up a generation, because we see, I think you and I have talked about this, we see that our role in the culture is radically going to be different. Most likely. It's open season right now on Christian and Christian worldview. It's openly mocked. So how do we raise up a generation of people, young people, who are able to stand faithful to the gospel? That's going to require a complete Christian worldview. Gone are the days where you can be kind of a cultural Christian. So we're excited about that. And I never envisioned that completely, but when you brought that up, it was like, that fits, because we also want to do down the road some type of a seminary pastoral training thing. So
that's my dream.
Yeah. So how cool would that be, that we have something from kindergarten all the way up into literally sending men around the country, potentially, who are equipped to go and pastor in a very difficult time, because seminaries are capitulating right and left. I don't know of many seminaries who have not bowed their knee to the whole multicultural BLM social justice agenda.
Yep.
And so it's a difficult time for churches and leaders, and I think that the school represents something that...
But ripe with opportunity.
Yeah. So with that, I think the last thing that we'll do before we break to Karen and the financials is we would just admit that God has been exceedingly generous.
Yeah.
What you're going to hear is Karen, our treasurer, she's just going to share the financials and let you know how the Lord has blessed us over a very difficult year, and also the budget for 2021 and what we hope God will accomplish over the course of these next several months. So with that, we'll turn you over to Karen.
Hello, Missio. I am Karen Fantel, treasurer. It is my honor to present the financial results for our church for the past year and to give you a brief summary of what we foresee for 2021. 2020 started off strong. Both campuses were meeting regularly, and we began a remodel of the sanctuary and send room at the Kenosha campus. As many of you know, with any remodeling project, costs and time to complete always end up being more than initially projected, and we experienced that also with the Kenosha remodel. Then in March, in God's divine providence, COVID hit. Our churches were forced to close, and we were not able to gather as a church family. But through your faithfulness and God's grace, our giving contributions remained strong throughout the year, and we ended up finishing the year with only slightly lower than projected contributions in the general fund and strong, unanticipated giving in our building fund. By the end of the year, we had accumulated enough in the building fund to make an offer on a permanent location for our Milwaukee campus, and a few days into the new year had purchased a building in South Milwaukee. To be specific, giving contributions for the general operating fund for 2020 were $497,547, with missions fund revenues totaling $75,546, and the building fund receiving $70,641 in direct contributions. These numbers are for the church as a whole. Total revenues amounted to $510,566 in the general fund, which in addition to contributions includes amounts received from North American Missions Board, an inflow from savings of $23,000 to cover remodeling overruns, and miscellaneous other items. Expenditures came in lower than expected in most categories due to the shutdown of our facilities for a period of time. Overall, expenditures for the church were $497,316, resulting in a surplus for the general fund of $13,250. The missions fund also ended the year of 2020 with a surplus of $14,355, with many expenditures being lower than anticipated due to travel and gathering restrictions. Please see the attached financial statements for greater detail. See, not all news for 2020 was bad. During the last year, we have experienced God's rich mercy on His people when they are faithful to Him and His church. Our church grew as it seemed that every other aspect of our society contracted. The 2021 budget includes a few exciting new additions for our church. In the general fund, we have included the additional costs for owning a second building, and we have also included expenditures for running the new school in the fall, which include curriculum costs and the addition of a headmaster to our personnel expenses. Most other areas of the budget, such as ministry expenses, will remain similar to last year. We are anticipating an increase in giving of approximately 10% overall and total revenues of $545,215 for the church as a whole. Projected total expenditures of the same amount give us a balanced budget for the coming year. Again, I invite you to take a look at the attached reports for a more detailed breakout of the budget for all funds. By the Lord's grace, in 2021, we will continue to grow by reaching others with our only hope, the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Please pray that we would remain faithful to our Lord in all that we do. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions regarding our church's finances at any time, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to look ahead to 2021 now.
What you don't know is what happens off camera.
Everything in between
is where the gold is.
Yes. So,
anyhow, back to our script.
So what's 2021 going to look like? I'll just start with Milwaukee.
Really, it's all about Milwaukee. Kenosha doesn't matter.
There's no salt coming from this man over here. So this year we're going to be essentially, this year will be one giant transition.
Yeah, huge
basically.
Transition.
So as you know, if you've been around for any length of time, our long-term goal was to always plant a church. It's a full functioning on its own independent church. And so we chose to do what we call the umbilical model, which is the mothership feeds us resources as we...
it's kind of a mix.
I'm not going to run with that one anymore. We're this year we decided end of 2021.
Yep.
We'll make that final break officially, and so Lord willing, January 2022 will be our own church.
But we didn't just magically come up with that. We were looking at certain markers.
Yeah.
And so what were some of the ones that were critical?
Well, one was identity, right? That we become our own. You know, we weren't looking to be in the multi-church. When you just reproduce the DNA and the...
basically you just take Missio Dei Kenosha
franchise.
You just franchise it out, and there's a brand.
Yeah.
We were intentional that we wanted you guys to have your own sound, feel. The theology was the same, the passion to preach the word was the same, but what that would look like
in Milwaukee was necessarily different than
absolutely.
Kenosha.
And I would argue that COVID helped us because Milwaukee really had to just shut down. What Kenosha was able to continue on much quicker, but it really, I think it helped you guys kind of grow even closer together as a people because those groups just gathering in the home, but you started to gain that identity of...
Exactly, yeah. In the midst of it, it was challenging, but looking back on it, we can say it's a good thing that had happened there. And so, we're going to be transitioning to independence. Well, what does that mean? It's going to be happening in stages, and when it's all going to happen is somewhat to be determined. It's like everything we do around here. When it's the right time is when we do it. And so, with all that, though, we'll have to constitute as our own church, establish our own bylaws, become a 501c3, which is legalese for nonprofit.
And that's going to take months. So somewhere in the early middle of the year, we're going to begin the process of getting the paperwork and finding out what that means.
Yeah. With that, we'll get our own name. We're going to have to develop our own website, looking at our own app. Everything that I feel we just did when we planted this church. So doing it all again. Yeah. Nice thing is we've done it, so we kind of know what's coming. But there is purpose to that. It's not merely independence for the sake of independence, but if we're going to keep reproducing and planting churches and multiplying, by necessity we have to, because our current model now forbids us to. We're both forbidding ourselves to. There's no way we could do 3-4 campuses.
We are completely opposed to a video campus. We think it's wrong. It's unhelpful, unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. And you can't drive like we were doing before.
You start at 9 o'clock simply because that was the only way we could do it, where I could go up there and preach there and then come down here to preach, and vice versa for you. If we had a second plant with Grayson right now, how are we going to do that? It's impossible, but it's also intentional because we want you to become your own entity on your own, and we think it's healthy.
Yeah, and I'll mention one more thing with all that though. So what does that mean in terms of our relationship?
You're dead. I'm dead to you. That's how I
Again, no bitterness coming from this side of
no. I'm dead to you. I understand that.
I have been getting a lot of, that's a cop car, a lot of questions regarding what will our relationship be, Lord willing, when that happens. And the dream right now, the goal at least, is we want to stay connected in some way, some form. We do believe in partnership. We do believe that in resourcing, and there's a lot of goodness that happens from that. And so we'd like to see some type of third party entity pop up.
Well, how that looks, we're not sure, because we want to do it right. So again, it will evolve.
Yes, like all things. And that it will be sort of an umbrella thing that will be the place where we do training, planting of churches, international missions, like the teaching.
Well, that's where it started. Was we were looking at, will you still want to go to Ethiopia? You've always still had a heart for Serbia. I do too, but you've developed some really good relationships there. How do we look at those opportunities, and how do we fund that? Does that just come all out of Kenosha, or do you share in it, and how do we work that out? And that's where we started thinking, what if we take a portion of our income, both of ours, our offerings, and put it toward a central fund, and that will fund our missions trips. And then we thought this would be a natural place to begin to fund men who want to become planters.
Exactly.
And so, because at first it's going to be awkward. It'll be just you and I, meaning our two churches. But down the road, Grayson plants and finally becomes its own entity and independent church, and he's feeding into it. And then you guys, because Kenosha is not going to be the primary planting church very quickly. If Grayson goes west and you're up there in the Milwaukee area, it's literally going to be moving out from you guys, and we'll be helping feed that and support it. But you guys are going to be the natural people saying, okay, now let's look at Lake Geneva or the middle of Milwaukee or north side. And I mean, it's just, that's the way it's going to go. How do we all cooperate so it's not falling on you or us?
Exactly.
We see that as a central fund, but it has to be managed properly. It has to be above reproach. It can't be a slush fund. Right. But on top of that, we also, the classical school, we can see that becoming a very natural part of that.
Because we'd like to see, I'd love to see classical school up by us.
Right. Well, and it's not remotely in stone at all. It's not even jelly-like, but
another cop car.
Yeah. So it's not even with the school. It's not even established in stone. It's very jelly-like, but it's the idea of maybe our campus could host the grade school, and yours could host the middle school, high school, or we just decide we're going to have two schools completely functioning. Or if the Lord works it, we could actually buy a piece of property. We talked about maybe in the Racine area, Racine County, somewhere that's kind of centrally located that can naturally feed the various campuses and churches. All of that would fit under that. But again, we're talking, and nothing exists.
Right.
But we realize that would be the natural thing.
Yeah.
So it's a family of churches.
Exactly. It'll be a network. And so with that, of course, we'd love to still do the celebration services. And I think that would just be, that to me will just get better and better as churches keep being planted and keep growing, that every time we do one of these things, it's just, you're seeing so many new faces and baptisms. Right. And so,
that's happened quicker than I thought it would. My whole personal goal with the celebration service was just to rejoice that, your church was started out so small, and that can be very discouraging. I remember your opening Sunday, and we didn't know, will we have a lot of people or nobody? I don't know if we had anyone show up. And did you have anyone new? Maybe,
I think
maybe one or two. And so, of course, you hear on church planting videos and whatnot. You know, the
You hear
first
the great-
Sunday,
yeah, always
400
the
people
success
came, and
stories,
we had
right.
99 baptisms. And you're like, okay, well, we didn't. But we had a very different model anyhow. So how do you keep them motivated? Well, by having these celebration services, they're still coming down and they're realizing, well, we have grown. And look, we baptized some people. And look, Kenosha has too. And we're still one church and one people with one vision. And my dream is the day that we hit 1,000. I know it's a random number, but just I want to see 1,000 people gathered, all singing and rejoicing, and yet we don't know each other.
I keep telling people, I said, I have 2 reasons to become a megachurch. One is to have an executive pastor, take care of all the admin. But 2 is I just to hear the singing.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Well, you were with us. You went to Grace Community Church with Kim and I, and you got to hear 5,000 people singing, and that was just it's sweet.
Foretaste of heaven, I think.
Yeah. So I just have a dream that, I mean, I've already seen it happen in your church where this last time I preached, I really felt like I was a guest speaker. So many people there I literally don't know, and they don't know me. It was interesting. I had a couple people introduce, hi, thinking I was a
welcome to the church.
Yeah. I'm like, sure, if only you knew. But, you know, that actually did my heart good that I'm coming in and I'm not that guy anymore. They see you as their pastor. And that's a massive shift in thinking and a good, healthy one.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, right?
That's the goal.
We're also reworking social media. That's a big pain in the neck.
I mean, a lot of this is being driven from just privacy issues. And again, so much of what we've been doing this year has been driven by the developments in the culture and what that therefore means for the church. And so we're trying to just get ahead on as many things as possible. And one of these is privacy, to keep the government's nose out of us and what we're doing. And so what are we going to be doing with the app? You're more knowledgeable on this.
Well, we're
part.
expanding on that. We found out that our app actually has some additional features that allow us to message each other, create groups.
That's right.
So instead of using Facebook, that was convenient. Facebook had a place and a time, but we believe it's done. And so we'll keep a Facebook presence because people still use it, but it's going to be purely outward facing. This is our church so that you can come and hear and know something's happening. But with internal, it's going to be via our app. And that's going to be, I think, much more healthy. It will create, the Sunday school groups will be used on that, the community groups, all of that, so everyone can quickly contact each other. The only challenge will be those who don't want to have a smartphone. It's like, you know, we'll have to address everything as they come, but we're trying to create it so that we're not out there. Right now we use Gmail and the Google platform a lot. We don't like that at all. So we're in the process of untethering ourselves from that. All of our podcasts is via the scripts and stuff. And so we're just trying to say, look, these things are overtly anti-Christian now. I mean, the very fact that Twitter was able to deplatform the sitting president of the United States, like him or hate him, I don't care. He's the sitting president of the United States, and before his term's done, you just shut him off, is shocking. Yeah. I mean, that's frightening. And then you add to that Parler, they started growing, and so Amazon just says, you're done. Yep. And it completely shut down an exploding business. Those things really alarmed us, and so we're...
Well, and it's a challenge because we're so connected to those things.
Right.
I mean, like Amazon, I'm not a fan of personally, and it's gone away in my home, but still the church in many ways is connected to it.
Right.
And so we got to figure some things out.
How do we extricate ourselves from those so that we're not all of a sudden one day somebody complains or Google just decides, you know what? We've noticed that what things we consider hate speech or something, and we just get unplugged. I know of people who have been deplatformed on Facebook, and their entire monetary existence is gone. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they have to kowtow to these. We cannot compromise on the word. So we're looking at all of that. And you and I even just talked off the top of our head, and John actually showed John Randall showed an openness to it of even potentially flying out to Serbia at some point, if we can, to interview some of those old Christians who grew up during the communist regime and how they did church and how they functioned, because
that's not extreme language anymore.
no, last
that's-
year people might have thought that, but I don't think people are thinking it quite that way anymore. If you're really going to stand firm, it's same thing with our school. We're refusing any government funds, vouchers included, nothing. We will not allow any funds to come into our church via the government, so that all these mandates on transgender and everything else, that they cannot say, look, you have built your entire business model around us funding you, and therefore we're going to tell you how you have to do it. I think a lot of Christian schools in the next year or two are going to be in major trouble as they discover, even though right now people are saying, oh no, we won't do that. Oh no, we won't do this. Well, they keep telling us that, and then they do it.
That's why we also did not take a dime of PPP.
Payroll
protection program.
I was offended at the number of large ministries and churches that took millions of dollars in, and we're like, no, that was something I was thankful Karen was very reluctant to take, and we agreed with her. And again, God blessed us. Yeah. We didn't suffer one bit. We grew, and God was kind.
Maybe someday my thought of 20 acres and a shipping carton will come true.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah. So, but we're also going to, so we're reducing ourselves on the social media and trying to be a little wiser and more conservative on that. We're also going to actually, Lord willing, launch the school in the fall. It's an act of faith. It really is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know how it's all going to come about, but what I want to say is the people who are rolling up their sleeves and saying, look, we're not just going to watch you do it and not resist it, but the ones who are actually saying, how can we help? They've been just a tremendous blessing of helping get things going, because it has to. I mean, it's not gonna. It's kind of like when we changed and we actually replanted as Missio Dei. There were those who just rolled up their sleeves and said, let's get to work, let's do it. And others who were not resisting, but they weren't also helping. They were just kind of like, well, we'll see how it all works. We're really excited that there's a solid group of people who are saying, we're behind it, let's get this going. And they understand there's a sacrifice, they understand there's a risk, but they're willing to do it. We think that by doing that, we're planting seeds. How many years out that we'll see the fruit? 10, 20 years. Yeah. That takes vision, and that takes faith that you're going to say, we're going to start now, because 10, 20 years from now, the fruit of that will start to come out as these young men and women are stepping into a culture that is completely, most likely, anti-Christian. That's going to take some people with firm convictions as to what they believe.
Yeah. So then, what are you looking at here with another plant?
Well, yeah. So by now, everyone should be comfortable with Grace, and it's been fun because I did this with you, and watched you go from a young man that I knew to. I think I told you that when you taught Greek, I thought that was a critical moment for you, because people stopped thinking of you as Matt Miller, the boy, or young boy, or man, or something, but they saw you as the teacher. And that was a critical shift in some people's thinking. They realized, oh, he knows stuff. And then you started preaching more and preaching more and preaching more. And you found your voice. Well, Grayson was on the edges there. And so we let him preach, 4 times a year?
Yeah, something like that.
And he began to do that, and we were able to work with him on those things. And now he's preaching on every 4th Sunday. And you remember those days when that was you. And we watched him mature as a preacher. He's been given responsibility of oversight, and I still meet with him weekly, and just watching him. Now he's in the process of trying to develop some people around him, and that's hard. That's just hard. It's hard work. I don't wish that on anyone, but he's doing it and he's working at it. And we're hoping that at the end of this year, we can bring him on full time. If God is pleased, we can do that. And then we can send him then within another year. Maybe it will happen next year. We don't know. that we can move west. That's what we're kind of looking. We're looking on the west side of the I, maybe Bristol, Paddock Lake, someplace like that, and try to capture that whole community of people, and that he can plant a church. But by that time, you'll be on your own,
Yep.
and we can work with him, and I think it's a workable situation. Meanwhile, we have another man working with you, and we have some people that we're looking down the road that could potentially become planters as well. So we're kind of looking at a really exciting possibility there.
Yeah.
But what we'd ask everyone is just pray for those things. How would you ask people to pray as we kind of bring this all to a close? What would you say would be the things that people should be in prayer for with your congregation?
Yeah, well, wisdom and patience. There's a lot of things happening, and it's like every time we do something, it's like the first time.
Yeah.
So we're just blazing all kinds of trails. And so with that, though, you want a lot of wisdom, just not to make foolish or hasty decisions. With that, you're going to need patience in the people. But really just to keep bearing fruit, that God would be pleased to use us. Our goal has been and always will be to just keep multiplying, because that's the Great Commission, and that's what drives us. And so I think John just preached on Colossians chapter 1, right? And before he did, I said, this is my prayer, whether you know it or not, as pastor for you,
right?
Often. And
that's your favorite, one of your favorite passages, right?
Yeah, it is. And he preached it.
But we helped him work through all that passage. So
yeah,
our fingerprints are in it.
Yeah, so I could just say, if you want to know how to pray this next year, go back and listen to John's sermon.
Yeah.
That would be probably one of the best things.
I'd also add flexibility, because you guys are in such a state of change. This whole year is going to be, like we just said, transition.
I was telling Lydia, what's interesting is somebody asked me, I think it was Pat, he said, we were in the sanctuary, the chapel as we call it, at the new church. And he's like, so I have a question for you. And I said, what? And he said, so is it strange to finally be in a church building that's yours, that you're pastor of? And because it's something you've been, this has been like the goal for 15 years, And I'm like, honestly, I've not even thought about it, because I can't. I'm always thinking
right.
years down the road, whether people know it or not, and you understand this,
right.
is I'm not even thinking this year or next year, you're thinking years. And so I've not even had the opportunity to just enjoy what we have. But with all that, I realized the potential of having a building also can create a lot of just comfort and rigidness. And so what you want the people to do is remain flexible, because we're always trying to move, multiply, do certain things. And so as much as the building's a blessing, I'm going to be working, just so you all know, I'm going to be working really hard at trying to keep us nimble, which is frustrating, but at the same time, I think necessary.
But that's what your job is. And so I have no doubt you'll do well with it. And I like how you said is that people, I always find it fascinating what people think a pastor's thinking and what a pastor is thinking. And you're right. You're never looking at right in front of you. You're always thinking, where's this? I'm always thinking, where is this leading? And do I like where it's potentially leading? And so ours is an older, more mature congregation. So I'm always trying to gauge the long-term consequences of decisions that we make. I mean, the school is a huge one. I'm not thinking about just the launch. I'm excited about that, but I'm thinking about what's that going to look like? What are the potential roadblocks and challenges that we face? For us, I would say that we need to be in prayer that we not become content, because we can say, well, we launched a church. I'm tired just thinking about launching it again with Grayson. I mean, it's just, I know what's coming. I know you know what's coming. You know what he's going to go through. You know what the people who go with him will go through. I know what's going to happen to our own congregation. It hurts to see people we love go away. It hurts. Yep. It's exhausting as a pastor, because somebody was asking me about that. I said, I keep raising up leaders so they can go away. They never stay. They never stay by my side to work with me. They eventually leave, and that's good. That's right. But it's tiring, and so the people have got to be comfortable with that. They if not, what will happen is they'll start grabbing, and holding and resisting, and that won't be healthy for the church. So our role as a church will shift as the satellites and plants move outward. It will have started here, and we can either become very passive, and I don't want that, or we can continue to realize that we are to be a missional people in our community. We're still reaching the people for Christ. We're still preaching the word. We're still developing, training, and sending. And so I would just pray that people keep a vision of what Missio Dei is about. The other thing is, I would pray for the people who are newer, that we would, as a people, pray for the newer people, that they might learn the vision, because they're coming in. They're not coming because somebody led them to Christ. They're coming because their church stopped being their church for one reason or another. So we need to work hard at helping them get that vision, that we're not just a rest stop. And if we are only a rest stop, that they understand that quickly so they can go on to where they can flourish. But we want them to come in and buy into the vision of what Missio Dei is about. I mean, not just nod, literally buy into it and begin to say, then where do I fit in that? So I would ask our members just to be in prayer for that. Continue to be seeking ways to be generous, consider ways that they might serve, and be used. I also would ask some of them, begin to pray, might they be people who should go with Grayson? We've had some longtime members who say they are, and it breaks my heart. Each one of them who said they're willing, I'm like, I don't want you to go, but it's good for them to go. And so I would say that our church here needs to be praying, should we go? Is that something we should do? And then if they're a key person in our congregation, who are they equipping so they can go without leaving a gaping wound for us? Well, with that, anything else you would say?
No, I just want to, just thank everybody for this past year. I mean, we've done so many things. I think, so many people on Sunday, just in light of the new building and all the work that's being done. Of course, I want to thank Pat, who every week just faithfully labors to bring us good music, solid theological music every week. All of our sound guys, I had to this year teach Sunday school one day.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, because it was such a sickness ran through us, and that week I happened to not be preaching, and I'm like, I'll teach Sunday school. So I taught the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, and my daughter's in that class, so it was kind of sweet. It was a lot of fun, but I used to teach Sunday school, but going back in that was so good for me to remember how important that ministry is, raising up that future generation. And so with that, just want to also thank all the teachers and the helpers who every week care for our kids that way. So,
well, and the same is true here.
Yeah.
Between Mark and Lena, that captures our music and sound. And what's nice is I never have to wonder what I'm going to see on the Sunday. I know that we're going to have excellent theology. We're going to be hearing the scriptures in song and in word. All that's done flawless. Mark is a stickler for high quality and all that. But again, our biggest ministry in our church here is the Sunday school ministry. And you watch, 2/3 of our church disappears when I dismiss them. And they're all being taught, but I know what they're being taught. We have classes that are just jammed with children, and we're so thankful for it. There's an incredible amount. The small church has to function by volunteers, not by staff,
right.
And they're unsung heroes, but the Lord is gracious to them, and I have no doubt that there's hidden blessings in that some of them will discover in years to come as they see the fruit of their labors, of a little one who now is bold with the gospel. That's what I want to see is somebody's like, I had a part in that. I was part of that life. So we're thankful for the church. We hope that this has been helpful and also a sense of what we're doing and where we're going as 2 congregations, soon to be truly 2 churches, Lord willing. So Lord bless.